This is your daily real estate syndication show, and I am your host, Whitney Sewell. Today is a highlight show that's packed with value from different guests around a specific topic. Don't forget to like and subscribe, but also go to lifebridgecapital.com where you can sign up to start investing in real estate today. I hope you enjoy the show. Our guest is Ken Van Liew. Thanks for being on the show, Ken.
Thank you, Whitney. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, Ken started his professional career with a civil design engineering job, twins and 2 master's degrees. Twins would have been enough right there, Ken. But 2 master's degrees also, underpinned with a 6-figure debt and a burning desire to serve others. 3 years later, he cut the ribbon on the development of a $17 million, 72,000 square feet, 113-bed assisted living facility. Alongside the syndication and development of over $1 billion of high-profile real estate investments, Ken created the modern wealth building formula as the fastest track to building wealth, a project that has empowered thousands of developers over the last 20 years. Ken, welcome to the show. Obviously, I want to hear a little more about your background, and like I said, the twins alone would man, that's a degree in itself. But then 2 master's degrees, and then the way you've got into real estate. Give us a little more of that journey, and build that picture for us a little bit, so we can move into this modern wealth building formula as well.
Oh, absolutely. It's been a blessing for me. I wasn't a great student. I loved football, and I was an all-state football player in high school and won a couple of championships. And when I got to college, I figured I would create the 6-year plan, and I just couldn't pick up on calculus and physics, so I struggled. And I met my wife my 3rd year in college, and I'm still with her today. 38 years later, she taught me how to study. And, that was really the start of a career where I decided, maybe I could be an engineer. And a few years later, I got graduated engineering school. I had won an award on civil design and how to subdivide, and it planted a seed, but I really didn't connect all the dots, with civil design and a little bit of summer job construction and, what's going on with real estate. It was just about the time that Robert Allen came out with the book, Buy a House with No Money Down, and I couldn't even afford a car. My first car was like $700, and it had multicolors from several accidents and didn't start, So that's kind of what I started. Dad gave me $10 a week, went down to college after, 6-pack and washing clothes. We were pretty much just hustling, and that led eventually to a civil engineering degree, but I was, bored sitting at the table, got back into construction, had an opportunity to build my first building in Poughkeepsie. And that led into skyscrapers into New York City. And it's just been a ride ever since. Wow.
Into skyscrapers in New York City. Tell us, I guess, give us a little insight into what your focus is right now. Like, what are you doing in real estate? What's your business now? Help us to visualize that.
Yeah. And I jumped, and I'll drop back to, the first big one we did, it was back, you mentioned the $17 million assisted living, which was the beginning of the modern wealth building formula. I didn't really know what it was about other than I was finding funding and facilitating developments, and it turned into the formula. But today, we continue to apply the formula. We're involved in a large multi-use development in Chester, New Jersey, which has a 100-year-old restaurant that we're restoring. It has affordable housing, market rate housing, commercial office, and being driven by my first CVS that we signed a lease, really excited about. We have another 13 acres where we're developing anywhere from still in conceptual design between 75 and 100 residential units, and carving out 3 acres for somewhere between 100 and 120,000 square feet of self-storage. We're consolidating land in 3 different towns, Watchung, Warren, Hanover, at this time, consolidating, trying to create something pretty extraordinary. Talking to some, continuing care retirement community groups in the assisted living space, have some other small subdivisions. And we're also going to take advantage of what we believe is going to be tremendous opportunity across the country, with the upturn happening, with everything and all the excitement. So, that's what we're doing, having fun.
Tell us about the modern wealth building formula. What is that? And let's go through that a little bit.
Yeah, the modern wealth building formula was, something I coined after 30 years, and I never was good at like board games or word puzzles or anything like that. But with all my personal development, I was always thinking Tony Robbins. And I was sitting there one day, and I'm always like, take massive action. And the M popped up. And, and then I had just finished this course with Landmark. It was on wisdom, and the W popped up. And, I didn't want to just be a leader. I wanted to be a bold leader, and then to be, and then I was forward thinking, and I was playing around, and I was like, wow, modern wealth building formula, how to master real estate investing. And what really came from that was, I'm starting to put together what I've been doing all these years, which have been very successful. And looking back, had proven that this modern wealth building formula, which was syndication, I had not only done it on a real estate development out of the box, but I took that top-down thinking and then applied it to multifamily and residential, wholesale, fix and flip, and showed that in almost any type of real estate, eventually, if you want to scale it, it's nice to have a little bit of cash flow, equity available when necessary, share the wealth, give opportunities across the board. Saw it to start to work and said, well, it's really kind of a system on what I've done, I think, a little differently. There's a lot of data out there to find deals, but I find projects a little bit different than everybody. So I had a finding process as part of the system. And I had a funding process. I called it unlimited funding because when I started, I didn't think I was going to be able to finance a $17 million deal. But when I finished that, it gave me the confidence where I was like, okay, I got this figured out. I could do unlimited funding. And the facilitation of a development, I always figured, if you can manage a development, it has all the components. If you find a development, it's the same skill sets that you use in finding a residential multifamily. Funding is kind of the same thing. So I'm not like I'm totally reinventing the wheel, but I had to find, fund, and facilitate 3F system that I called it, which ultimately added in a little bit of injection of, personal development, a little bit of Tony Robbins. And that created this, what I would say, sports enthusiastic modern wealth building formula. When you read the book, it tells you a little bit about the pregame exercise and, where you kind of size up in the lineup if you look at it from a baseball perspective. And it just, you have a little fun with it, and it really comes down to top-down thinking. Because if you think from the top, you could pretty much do anything in real estate. And that came from building a couple skyscrapers in New York City.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. I know, building, not just everyone's been a part of building skyscrapers in New York City or anywhere for that matter. What are some things that you learned from that specifically that have helped you, throughout your real estate career?
Great question. The biggest takeaway, the first takeaway was, this is swimming with sharks every day. There was a book they wrote about that one time. But what I really took away at the end of the day when I wouldn't say left New York City construction, when I paused last year on some New York City construction because of the pandemic. And 2 years ago, I had a concrete company where we poured, a couple 30-story towers. And, after building 1,500 units and 3 million square feet in New York City, I really analogized building a skyscraper as building an extraordinary life. And, I don't want to go off cue with real estate, but, I'm doing it for a specific reason because it applies across the board for anybody. And, I think everybody wants an extraordinary life. And if they could do it through real estate, they get the best of both worlds. And what I learned in New York City construction, and if you've ever, seen a project, obviously you probably have in your neck of the woods, but in New York City, you see this green fence that goes around the site. If say it's a parking lot or if there's demolition, you see some activity. But this green fence goes around the site and you just see this green fence. It opens up, once a day. And, it's during this 6 months process that you build this foundation. And, I can only say that the foundations in New York City are the strongest foundations in the world. And like in life, you need a strong foundation because, there's going to be a couple earthquakes. And, pouring concrete structures, I learned that, without that structure that can handle, the earthquake loads and the wind loads, that's the backbone that you get in life that you have to build upon. And in New York City, it's all about the cycle. So as I was pouring concrete, by the time I was up to the 10th floor, if things were managed properly and my project managers were on top of things, we were literally starting the elevators and starting to, install the skin on the building. And that's because, in life, you need a tough skin because, you're going to weather the storms. And we'd race to the top and of course, batten down the hatches, with the roof, and then start, life, building that building, and coordinating hundreds of men and getting exhilarated by it. Like there's nothing like waking up in the morning and having, 400 or 500 guys on your job and, things are humming and, you're building the heart and the guts of a high rise, and I say to people that are building houses, you could do it. It's just like building 30 houses on top of each other. You're going to get that cycle instead of just going in and framing one. The framer just goes to the second floor. Framer goes to the third floor, followed by the electrician, followed by the plumber. And it's just a cycle you create. And that's what life's all about. It's a cycle and real estate's a cycle. And it's all a fine thread through everything as you really sit back and look at what's going on in life. Like I'm not confused, and it's not rocket science.
I think it's interesting. You talk about the 6 months to build a foundation, but it looks like there's really nothing going on.
It really does. There's so much behind the scenes and pre-construction on those jobs. Sometimes we build on paper for another 6 months, but the beauty of it is when it gets to street level, and we used to pride ourselves, my concrete company, that every 4 days we'd have another floor. So, it takes 6 months to get to ground level, but then you're talking, in 3 months, you're up, we go 6 days, 4-day cycle. And you're looking good. All of a sudden, 20 floors pops up in 2 months, and it's game on.
Wow. What are some of the difficulties as a developer that maybe aren't known or seen by just the average real estate investor?
Did you say difficulties or?
Yes.
With developers, there's more moving parts, which means more personalities, and what it really comes down to, if you know your game, it's really just more. Creating unity and teamwork, eliminating, delegating, automating as much as you can, because you as the, top of the hill or calling the shots, you can't get stuck in other things other than critical path items that if it's delayed, it'll delay the project and ultimately cost you extra money, and that's really what the developer does. One of the things that, we've analyzed is this 9-foot matrix of the development process, and segments of that matrix, apply to multifamily. If you're buying a project, there's may not start with conceptual design, but it starts with intense due diligence that you really have to dive into, and you have to dive into all your contracts and warranties and guarantees, things that you're doing, on the development from the onset. When you're buying contracts out, you're not going to want to deal with warranty and guarantees at the end of the day when you don't have the leverage. You want to take advantage of the leverage you have up front, right? Buy it strong. That's where you make your money. You've probably heard it. You make your money in the buy, So same applies when you're developing.
Our guest is Dan Kryzanowski. Thanks for being on the show, Dan.
Awesome, Whitney. Great to be here.
Dan is an active real estate investor and fundraiser, leveraging self-directed accounts, SDI, IRA, and solo 401ks to create a diversified real estate portfolio yielding double-digit returns. He specializes in self-storage, last-mile industrial, and niche multifamily and residential. Dan and his partners have raised millions of dollars from family offices and individuals and empowered his community to raise 7 figures on multiple occasions. So Dan, grateful to have you on the show. This is definitely something that the listeners and myself have worked a long time on, is raising capital and just thinking through, that process and what that looks like. But, give us a little more about, who you are, your background, and then let's jump into, your superpower, raising 6 figures in 6 minutes.
Sure. Thanks so much. Yeah. So I grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania. So I'll take a moment to let the office jokes, come in here. Total Ozzie and Harriet lifestyle. My dad was a high school principal. My mom was a social worker. I know you do some great stuff on the nonprofit side. I've been engaged with Hugh O'Brien Youth, a leadership seminar for high school sophomores for a long time. And to keep the math easy, I say I'm not the brightest guy. So I graduated Wharton in 2000, and probably like many folks on the call, heavy as 9/11 was on the psyche, from a work perspective, we kind of still kept on plugging away. I was with Merrill Lynch and post-grad schools with GE Capital for a while. Fortunately, I had a taste of Austin, Texas. So it's still weird down here in a very good way. I joke I used to be able to, I should have bought the land where Franklin Barbecue is now, because I could have had free barbecue every day forever. But so, we all have our myths in life. But, I share that because I, maybe had a little crystal ball foresight of where I think, especially we're seeing the world today, but about a decade ago, in terms of, do I want to strictly work a 9 to 5, strictly max out my 401k, and then, kind of hope and say, hey, great, I'm 60 years old, here's a pension. And the world is not playing out that way. So I give myself, a little bit of credit. And for the past decade, I've really doubled down here in Texas, both on the 9 to 5 side in real estate tech and fintech, but also being very open to multiple asset classes, primarily in real estate, and finding myself, as probably a lot of folks here, just as a passive LP investor, and then realizing, wow, I really, pun intended, I'm sinking, with the syndicators. And, from here, it's just been natural discussions. And like folks say, it doesn't really feel like work when what you're doing is what you enjoy. So that's not deep in the weeds, but at a very high level, I think it's, sometimes if you're in the right place, you just got to ride the wave.
Wow. Well, I'm just looking forward to this conversation, Dan, and just really thinking through some of the stuff that you've accomplished and helping us to do the same. And let's just jump right in there to being successful in raising capital, how you've done it. Mm-hmm. And let's just jump right in and I guess get us started and how you're enabling sponsors and to do this and break it down for us.
Sure. I mean, Whitney, much like you, I think really educating and servant leadership and, having some faith and then things play out is how I really viewed it. So I was very fortunate, sometimes in serendipitous way back, in 2017, I was on a flight with Henry Yoshida, and Henry's last company, Goldman Sachs, gobbled up about 18 months in. And I said, hey, Henry, do you ever think about self-storage? And he said, no, not really. And I'm like, well, if you fill out all these papers and boom, boom, boom. And in his mind, he thought, well, imagine if there was just a button, or if you eliminated all the friction and we can unlock this $10 trillion of self-directed money, how beneficial would it be for not only the average Joe Jay in America, but also all of the sponsors out there? So this was part of my first step in terms of, I'll call it, mass evangelization, where I had the great opportunity, particularly on the multifamily side, to meet with many of the headline players, but then also speak to and mentor, advise a lot of folks that are still trying to get their first deal and how to get to it. And in some ways, it's very simple. So if there's any takeaway, from this call, I would suggest, whether you're on the LP side or syndication side, is, get your big text message that you've been doing during COVID and say, hey, folks, did you know you can use your retirement dollars to invest with me or co-invest with me in this deal? And lo and behold, people that have done this, particularly syndicators on a regular basis, get about 15 to 20% of their raise. So I like to say you get to take Friday off because your audience is made aware that they have their share of this $10 trillion on the sidelines to invest in your deal.
So you think, a big part of what we need to be doing then is telling people that they can use their IRA, because I guess most they have no clue, right?
Yeah. It's a really, and this isn't something like, I call them I'm dating myself here, the Mr. Burns of the world, keep back with their accountant. SDIRAs have been around for 50 years. That said, it's been kind of an old, stodgy, it really has not been, as I'd say, country club cool. And for my Texans on the call, where they were in jeans and boots, are all prettied up. It really hasn't been cool. But, recognizing how folks are just, we'll stereotype in a good way, the millennial generation, how they want to sign up quick. They want transparency. They want to see one price, no fine print. That is where I think the self-directed world is moving. And there's a few select providers that are making it very easy, whether through just that tagline you mentioned or something like a knowledge base and FAQ to really get into the deep details so folks can self-educate or have conversations with people that have been around the block a few times. Which ultimately is going to move money, frankly, that's probably sitting in cash or a bond right now, or some old Fidelity, 401k IRA, into something where you're investing with somebody you trust or in your community.
Wow. So what are some ways that we can inform people and let them know to, obviously to grow our investor base and to educate them, or maybe ways that you've seen to be most successful?
Yeah. Like anything, I think it's, this is going to just have faith in your offering. I know a lot of folks do and they're pumped up about it, but I think you should look to educate, because even I know multifamily, I call it versus, the niches. such as a storage RV park, where frankly, probably even 90% of active investors aren't familiar. Most folks have a general feeling of multifamily is. That said, I have a buddy and he's in the greater Metro DC area. So politics way aside, it's still kind of unique. Most folks are like, oh, it's our capital, but I really don't know what a multifamily would look. Is it going to be a 100-year-old property? Is it a brand new development, et cetera? Where is it in terms of proximity, school districts? So I think there's a lot of education off the bat you can do. So that's how I think you get folks engaged. Secondly, I think to have some sort of urgency on the call. I do think you want to get up to a certain threshold. And listen, I mean, if this is your first property or a smaller property, this might even be 25 or 50K. A lot of crowdfunding sites, which I would not recommend doing for your first deal but what they do is they say, you have to get to a certain threshold and then we'll give you more love, from our marketing efforts. And I think in the same way, you want to get that first, call it 100K through the door. And a lot of it's going to come from education, urgency. And, maybe you throw an extra percent, or we call this the A share. Or maybe you say, I'll give you a point back. So there's different ways that you can get that first, and like anything, once the first 100K, you keep on seeing the bricks say if you have to raise $1 million. So that's been really, I think, successful. And, folks like to get that grand back if they put in 100K. So there's just some little strategies to get to that first step.
Okay. So what are some things you're doing now to increase your ability to raise capital and to move forward?
Yeah. So, I'm a licensed finder here in Texas. So it's great to have these conversations, from Texans for Texans. We have a great meetup community. Obviously, it's a bit more virtual. We tend to naturally social distance here in Texas. So, you could have a few guys around the fire, as they say. But, as I said, I think it's two things. One is just, the education on how your asset class may be changing, or a new asset class. So, for example, I never thought of industrial real estate. If we had a poll on the call, I'd be curious what people would think of. And I was even more surprised to know there's a sub-retail component of, so think of something like a floor and decor, something that has been considered essential by the government, or somebody that built almost like a mini industrial park and put in 5-10 million of tenant improvements. Well, they're not moving out and they're cash flow heavy. So for me, my LP hat says this might be something really good to invest in. And then, say from a syndication standpoint, I think it's a very easy sell to say, everybody has cash and bonds and 1% sort of CDs on the sidelines. This is as close to, nothing is risk free, but I'd say recession resistant as possible. Maybe you should put some money here. So really getting down to, what people are going through, what people are thinking. A gentleman I talked to yesterday is 53 years old. This is perfect for his IRA because he can't touch it till he's 60, without penalty at this time. So, this is kind of realizing, I guess, two things: the subgroup that you're talking to, and then providing the education. And then finally, and this might be a bit of a tougher putt if one does not have a track record yet, but what really surprised me, and Richard C. Wilson of Family Office Club said this, and when you take a step back, it makes sense, is outside of Mark Cuban, a lot of family offices don't have like endless deal flow. You would think that everybody would, but it's not, venture capitalists, Anderson Horowitz, et cetera, they bring in tons, more deals than they can handle, or they probably just toss 99% of them out anyways. But the typical family office, it's not really structured that way. So some of it, I would say, for folks that, maybe you have deep roots in your demographic area, or you're in oil and gas, take advantage to speak to probably the 3 or 4 family offices, really learn their mandate, because ultimately they're going to invest with somebody that they personally like and trust. And if you sync with their mandate, meaning that I want dividend paying right now, or I don't care if I get a dividend for 10 years, I want to go, 2x, 3x, 4x, that's a very powerful thing, how you're going to structure your deal. Okay.
So syncing with the family office, it's interesting. There's probably a lot of listeners that are thinking, okay, wait a minute, I'm just trying to speak to the local investor. I'm not really ready to think about, or maybe not even understand what a family office is. Maybe you could give us just like the 30 seconds on what a family office is. And let's talk about that, family office a little bit, and why we should be thinking about partnering with something like that.
Yes, a family office would be think of the financial arm of a successful or notable family. So, for example, down here in Austin, Texas, everybody, has a Dell computer at one time in their life. So Michael Dell, no surprise, he has a family office. Now that's a pretty sophisticated, he probably has a team of 20 to 50 people. That said, I think more of, and I grew up in Scranton, PA, or Dunmore, actually, small town America. There's a few folks that have, I'd say, the equivalent of a family office. Maybe there's 50 to 250 million in it. They're obviously quiet about what they invest in, where they want to go. That said, you can probably figure out who is on their team relatively quickly. So it's not that super hush hush. And from that standpoint, if you feel there's a natural engagement, either with somebody in the family or on the team, that's how you develop this relationship.
So thinking through, when do I work with a family office, and maybe some pros and cons as well. I know, you have a partner like that. Obviously, they have a lot of control, some more than others, and I know there's some operators that say, I don't want to work with family offices because of that right there, but then again, if you can have one family office that's partnering with you, it's such a different process as opposed to working with 150 investors on one deal, and so can you talk to that a little bit, Dan?
Your comments are spot on. Why I'd say particularly for a first or novice sort of syndicator, it's difficult because particularly if you don't have the relationship, family offices, the benefit here is they do not have to imminently invest in anything. They can hold off a few months and frankly, they'll be fine. So, with that in mind, a lot of them, I think, wisely hedge their bets, particularly if they do have expertise in the space, say if they were in real estate or they think they have expertise in the space, they're going to put in we'll call it the 51% clause. They may not actually own 51%, but they may have some rights to say, if you don't hit these metrics, these KPIs, key performance indicators, we can boot you out, which, as I'd say, a verse indicator, particularly say in a niche market such as self-storage, there's obviously a difference in opinion from there. So, that's I would just say be aware, like any contract you sign, if you were to get into that. But, I think another way when we talk family office general, this is more of, I think, high net worth individuals also. So as you mentioned, Whitney, you kind of have the 50, 100K investors. A lot of folks on the first deal, that's where you're getting friends and family, their warm referrals. The other thing is when kind of the big check comes in. So that's why I go back to our earlier conversation is you're just not say, hey, here's the webinar or here's my marketing deal terms. No, it's here's why I think this submarket is very unique, or here's what I've learned. Here is our sweet spot because, this operator has known, say the Mexican American community south of San Antonio for these many years. This is who we're partnering with. Oh, okay. Now I have some interest and I look at the economics and you're right. This partner who you wisely had to manage the property has had a 30-year track record. You know what? I might pony up. You might not know I have $1 million, but I might pony up $1 million now. So, I go back to really just kind of the education of it. If you're sincere with it and very transparent and honest, you might be welcomely surprised how many referrals you get.
Thank you for being a loyal listener of the show. Please subscribe and share it with your friends. We want to help you become the passive investor you've always wanted to become, but also the operator you've always wanted to become. We want to be the number one resource for your real estate investing journey. But go to lifebridgecapital.com where you can start investing in real estate today.